Hello, and welcome back as we continue to read The Hobbit. Today we're going to learn about an important map and a key. When we left off last week, Bilbo had been listening to the dwarves sing their song about the misty mountains. And as he lay there listening, his mind was wandering and he was imagining adventures. He was thinking of dragons, plundering. And then suddenly he shuddered. And he was playing Mr. Baggins of Bag End Underhill again. This is where we'll pick up our story today. He got up trembling. He had less than half a mind to fetch the lamp and more than half a mind to pretend to and go hide behind the beer barrels in the cellar and not come out again until all the dwarves had gone away. Suddenly he found that the music and singing had stopped and they were all looking at him with eyes shining in the dark. "Where are you going?" said Thorin in a tone that seemed to show that he guessed both halves of the hobbit's mind. "Oh, what about a little light?" said Bilbo apologetically. "We like the dark," said all the dwarves. "Dark for dark business. There are many hours before dawn." "Of course," said Bilbo, and sat down in a hurry. He missed the stool and sat on the fender, knocking over the poker and the shovel with a crash. "Hush," said Gandalf. "Let Thorin speak." And this is how Thorin began. "Gandalf, dwarves, and Mr. Baggins, we are met together in this house of our friend and fellow conspirator, this most excellent and audacious hobbit. May the hair on his toes never fall out. All praise to his wine and ale." He paused for breath and for a polite remark from the hobbit, but the compliments were quite lost on poor Bilbo Baggins, who was wagging his mouth in protest at being called audacious and, worst of all, fellow conspirator. Though no noise came out, he was so flummoxed. So Thorin went on. "We are met to discuss our plans, our ways, means, policy, and devices. We shall soon before the break of day start on our long journey, a journey from which some of us, or perhaps all of us, except our friend and counselor, the ingenious wizard Gandalf, may never return. It is a solemn moment. Our object is, I take it, well known to us all. To the estimable Mr. Baggins and perhaps one or two of the younger dwarves, I think I should be right in naming Keely and Feely, for instance, the exact situation at the moment may require a little brief explanation." This was Thorin's style. He was an important dwarf. If he had been allowed, he would have probably gone on like this until he was out of breath, without telling anyone there anything they did not know already. But he was rudely interrupted. Poor Bilbo couldn't bear it any longer. At "may never return," he began to feel a shriek coming up inside. And at very soon it burst out like a whistle of an engine coming out of a tunnel. All of the dwarves sprung up, knocking over the table. Gandalf struck a blue light on the end of his magic staff, and in its firework glare, the poor hobbit could be seen kneeling on the hearthrug, shaking like a jello that was melting. Then he fell flat on the floor and kept calling out, "Struck by lightning! Struck by lightning!" over and over again, and that was all they could get out of him for a long time. So they took him and laid him out of the way on the drawing room sofa, with a drink at his elbow, and they went back to their dark business. "Excitable little fellow," said Gandalf as they sat down again. "Gets funny queer fits, but he is one of the best. One of the best. As fierce as a dragon in a pinch." If you have ever seen a dragon in a pinch, you will realize that this was only poetical exaggeration applied to any hobbit. Even to old Took's grand-uncle Bulroar, who was so huge for a hobbit that he could ride a horse. He charged the ranks of the goblins of Mount Graham in the Battle of the Green Fields and knocked their king Gulfinbull's head clean off with a wooden club. It sailed 100 yards through the air and went down a rabbit hole. And in this way, the battle was ended and the game of golf was invented at the same moment. In the meanwhile, however, Bulroar's gentler descendant was reviving in the drawing room. After a while and a drink, he crept nervously to the door of the parlor. This is what he heard, Gloin speaking. "Huh!" or some snort more or less like that. "Will he do you think? It's all very well for Gandalf to talk about this hobbit being fierce, but one shriek like that in a moment of excitement would be enough to wake the dragon and all his relatives and kill the lot of us. I think it sounded more like fright than excitement. In fact, if it had not been for the sign on the door, I should have been sure we'd come to the wrong house. As soon as I clapped my eyes on the little fellow bobbing and puffing on the mat, I had my doubts. He looked more like a grocer than a burglar. Then Mr. Baggins turned the handle and went in. The Took side had won. He suddenly felt that he would go to bed and breakfast to be thought fierce. As for little fellow bobbing on the mat, it almost made him really fierce. Many a time afterwards, the Baggins part regretted what he did now, and he said to himself, Bilbo, you were a fool. You walked right in and put your foot in it. Pardon me, he said. If I have overheard the words that you were saying, I don't pretend to understand what you are talking about or your reference to burglars, but I think I am right in believing, this is what he called being on his dignity, that you think I am no good. Well, I will show you. I have no signs on my door. It was painted a week ago, and I am quite sure you have come to the wrong house. As soon as I saw your funny faces on the doorstep, I had my doubts. But treat it as the right one. Tell me what you want done, and I will try it. If I have to walk from here to the east of east and fight the wild wereworms in the last desert. I had a great-great-granduncle once. Bull Roar Took, and... Yes, but that was a long time ago, said Gloin. I was talking about you. And I assure you there is a mark on this door, the usual one in the trade, or used to be. Burglar wants a good job, plenty of excitement, and reasonable reward. That's how it's usually read. You can say expert treasure hunter instead of burglar if you like. Some of them do. It's all the same to us. Gandalf told us there was a man of the sort in these parts looking for a job at once, and that he had arranged for a meeting here this Wednesday at tea time. Of course there's a mark, said Gandalf. I put it there myself, for good reasons. You asked me to find the 14th man for your expedition, and I chose Mr. Baggins. Just let anyone say I chose the wrong man or the wrong house, and you can stop at 13 and I'll have all the bad luck you like, or go back to digging coal. He scowled so angrily at Gloin that the dwarf huddled back in his chair, and when Bilbo tried to open his mouth to ask a question, he turned and frowned at him and stuck out his bushy eyebrows till Bilbo shut his mouth tight with a snap. That's right, said Gandalf. Let's have no more argument. I have chosen Mr. Baggins, and that ought to be enough for all of you. If I say he's a burglar he is, or will be when the time comes. There is a lot more in him than you guess, and a deal more than he has any idea himself. You may possibly all live to thank me yet. Now, Bilbo, my boy, fetch the lamp, and let's have a little light on this. On the table, in the light of a big lamp with a red shade, he spread a piece of parchment, rather like a map. This was made by Thror, your grandfather, Thorin, he said in answer to the dwarves' excited questions. It is a plan of the mountains. I don't see how this will help much, said Thorin disappointedly after a glance. I remember the mountain well enough and the lands about it, and I know where Mirkwood is and the Withered Heath and the great dragon's bread. There is a dragon marked in red on the mountain, said Balin, but it'll be easy enough to find him without that if we ever arrive there. There is one point you haven't noticed, said the wizard, and that is the secret entrance. You see the rune on the west side and the hand pointing to it from the other runes? That marks a hidden passage to the lower halls. Look at the map at the beginning of this book and you will see there the runes in red. Let's have a quick look at that map. See if we can see the runes. There's our map of the mountain. There's the picture of the dragon. And there are the runes that show a secret entrance to the mountain. Interesting. It may have been secret once, said Thorin, but how do we know that it is secret any longer? Old Smaug has lived there long enough now to find out anything there is to know about those caves. Smaug? We're going to learn more about Smaug tomorrow, but I'm just going to take a break here and show you a picture. Smaug is a very dangerous and fierce dragon. Look at him. This is Smaug and he's an important character in our story, and we're going to learn more about him and dragons the next time. Back to our story. He may, but he can't have used it for years and years. Why? Because it's too small. 5 feet high the door, and 3 may walk abreast, say the runes, but Smaug could not creep into a hole that size, not even when he was a young dragon. Certainly not after devouring so many of the dwarves and men of Dale. It seems a great big hole to me, squeaked Bilbo, who had no experience of dragons and only of hobbit holes. He was getting excited and interested again, so that he forgot to keep his mouth shut. He loved maps. In the hall there hung a large one of the country round with all of his favorite walks marked on it in red ink. How could such a large door be kept a secret from everybody outside, apart from the dragon? He asked. He was only a little hobbit, you must remember. In lots of ways, said Gandalf. But in what way this one has been hidden we don't know without going to see. From what it says on the map, I should guess there is a closed door which seems to have been made to look exactly like the side of the mountain. That is the dwarves' usual method. I think that's quite right, isn't it? Quite right, said Thorin. Also, went Gandalf, I forgot to mention that with the map went a key, a small and curious key. Here it is, he said, and he handed Thorin a key with a long barrel. So intricate, with words on it, made of silver. Keep it safe. Indeed I will, said Thorin, and he fastened it on a fine chain that hung about his neck and under his jacket. Now, things begin to look more hopeful. That news alters things much for the better. And we'll stop there. So let's have a quick look at our map so far. This is our map of Middle-earth where our story takes place. And I'm going to show you, we looked at this map a couple weeks ago, where our dwarves live. They live in the Shire, which is right here. And the mountains are here. So this is what they were looking at, is the map of the mountains. And they want to travel from the Shire to the mountains. Seems like a pretty quick trip, but we're going to see what happens in our story. Okay, so today we're looking at maps and keys, and I'm going to show you some different kinds of maps. First, we have our map of Middle-earth. This is a map that was drawn by someone based on the story. I also have a map here of a city. This is what a city map would look like. On one side, you can see all of the roads named, the highways, the street names. There's some river names as well. On the other side, it's a map of the downtown, and it shows the buildings, some of the different places you might visit while you were in that town. I also have another kind of map to look at. This is an example of a park map. This is a state park map. And usually a park map will look like this. You can see it shows you where the water is and where the grass is. And it has symbols to show you about different parts. So it shows you where the restrooms are, where you can park here, where there are some hiking trails. So this is an example of a park map. Another kind of map that your family might use would be a road map when you travel. This is an example of a road map that shows the road Route 66 as it travels through the state of Illinois. So those are just some examples of maps. In today's lesson, there's a short video you can watch that shows the different parts of a map. And the last thing we're going to look at is keys. Keys come in all shapes and sizes, and they do a couple of different things. First up, we have this very fancy key I showed you at the beginning of the video. This is an old-fashioned kind of key. You may be more familiar with a key that looks like this. Most car keys nowadays kind of have a bit of a plastic piece on them. And this other key doesn't even have a part that sticks out. This is a car key that's just a square plastic box. But when you get in the car knows the key is in the car and it will start for you. Next, I have this interesting key. I showed you this as part of our story. This is a drum key. This can be used to tighten and loosen parts of a drum to change the sound. Here's a small key. If you look very closely, you might see a deer on this key. This is a tractor key. Tractor keys tend to be a little bit smaller than car keys. Look at this interesting key. This is a vending machine key. It has a special hole on the end, and this is how you can open up a vending machine to put things in it or to get money out of it. So these are all kinds of keys. Here's my key ring. Oh, look at this key. This is a very interesting key. It just looks like a piece of plastic. It's called a key fob. And if you go to a certain kind of door that has an electronic lock, you just hold this next to the lock and it opens it. And finally, here's an example of the kind of key that you might have for your house. This is the kind of key that would open a lock on a door. If you have some keys in your house, ask someone to gather them up so you can look at them together. Feel how they're different. Some are metal, some are plastic. Some have bumpy parts, some are all smooth. So check out all the different kinds of keys you have and look at them and compare them. Thanks again for listening this week. For your activity this week, we're going to be looking at pictures of keys and maps and see if you can tell which one is which. I'll see you next week as we finish Chapter 1.